In museums around the world, there are pocket watches that were pulled from the bottom of the North Atlantic. Their hands are frozen, and almost all of them stopped within the same hour of the same April night in 1912. They belong to passengers of the largest ship human hands had ever built, a ship the newspapers called practically unsinkable, a ship carrying more than 2,200 people, millionaires and farmers, brides and stokers, and lifeboats for barely half of them. Nobody thought that number would ever matter. Tonight, we board the Titanic, not for the legend, but for the true final night, told through the people who lived it and the people who chose not to. So pull up a chair, because somewhere on the dark ocean ahead, the ice is already waiting. Hear that? That's my fire settling in. I'm Daniel Reed, and this is Fireside History, where the greatest true stories of the past are told slowly, clearly, and warmly, so you can enjoy them and grow your English at the same time. Tonight's story has 6 ignored warnings, a band that would not stop playing, and the night the richest man alive learned what money cannot buy. Get comfortable. We are going back to April 1912. Our main character tonight is not a person. It is the ship herself. The Titanic was the largest moving object ever built by human beings, nearly the length of 3 football fields, 11 stories high, with engines the size of houses. Inside her were swimming pools, palm court cafes, a grand staircase under a glass dome, and the finest suites money could rent on the ocean. On April 10, 1912, she left Southampton, England, on her very first voyage, bound for New York. On board were over 2,200 people. In first class rode the richest man in the world, John Jacob Astor, with his young wife. A few decks below traveled emigrants carrying everything they owned in a single bag, sailing toward new lives in America. And moving quietly between them all worked a young stewardess named Violet Jessup. Remember her? The crew called the ship Unsinkable, not as a boast, they believed, but as engineering. Her hull was divided into watertight compartments. She could float with 4 of them flooded. A magazine of the day wrote that she was practically unsinkable, and the public happily dropped the word practically. Confidence like that is a kind of cargo. The Titanic carried more of it than coal. Sunday, April 14th, the 4th day at sea. The water was calm as glass, the night coming on cold and moonless. And the ice began to speak. Through that single day, the Titanic's wireless room received ice warnings from other ships, 6 of them by most counts, one after another, each marking fields of ice directly along her path. Some reached the bridge, at least one, famously, never did. The operators were buried in a backlog of passengers' personal telegrams, chattering greetings to New York at 5 shillings a message. Late that evening, a nearby ship called the Californian radioed one final warning. We are stopped, surrounded by ice. The Titanic's exhausted operator tapped back sharply. In effect, keep out, I am busy. The Californian's operator shrugged, switched off his set, and went to bed. He was, by most accounts, only around 10 to 20 miles away. On the Titanic's bridge, the ship held her course, near full speed, into the dark. High in the crow's nest, 2 lookouts strained their eyes against the freezing wind, without binoculars. The story goes that the key to the binocular locker had been left behind in England, in a departing officer's pocket. 11:40 at night. High above the deck, lookout Frederick Fleet saw a shape where no shape should be, darker than the darkness, dead ahead, growing. He rang the bell 3 times and grabbed the telephone to the bridge. Iceberg, right ahead. The order came instantly. Hard turn, engines reversed. For a long breath, the great bow swung, and the mountain of ice slid past, almost gently, along the ship's right side. Many passengers felt only a faint shudder. Some slept straight through it. In the first-class lounge, men joked about the ice chips on the deck. Below the waterline, it was already over. The Iceberg had buckled the steel along nearly 300 feet of hull, opening the sea into 6 compartments. The Unsinkable Ship could survive 4. Thomas Andrews, the man who had built her, did the mathematics in minutes and gave the captain his answer. She would sink. An hour, 2 at most. What happened next was not panic, not at first. It was something stranger, disbelief. Stewards knocked on doors and asked passengers to put on life vests, and many refused. The ship was warm, bright and steady. The ocean was black and 28 degrees. People joked. An officer had to plead. The first lifeboats left the ship half empty. One boat, built for 40, pulled away carrying 12. By the way, if you're enjoying this story by the fire, subscribing to Fireside History is the best way to keep this fire burning. Now, back to the boat deck, because the angle of the floor has just changed. Down in the wireless room, the operators were sending the new distress call, SOS, one of the first times in history it was ever used. A ship called the Carpathia answered from 58 miles away and turned hard toward them, pushing her engines past their limits. She would need around 4 hours. The Titanic had 2. And on the tilting deck, 8 musicians carried their instruments up into the cold and began to play. Bright, calm melodies, as if it were Sunday afternoon. They understood exactly what they were doing. Music tells the body there is no emergency. Survivors said the band never stopped. Slowly the bow settled deeper. The joking faded, and the night divided every soul on board into 2 questions. Who goes, and who stays? On the boat deck, the rule was called out again and again, women and children first. Husbands lifted their wives over the rail, smiled, and promised to follow on a later boat. Most of them knew there was no later boat. An elderly couple, Isidore and Ida Strauss, owners of the great Macy's store in New York, reached the front of the line. Ida was offered a seat. She stepped back instead, took her husband's arm, and said that after a lifetime together, where he went, she would go. They were last seen side by side in deck chairs. Nearby stood John Jacob Astor, by many accounts the richest man in the world. He helped his young wife into a boat and asked calmly if he might join her. She was expecting a child. The officer said no. Women and children first. Astor nodded and stepped back into the crowd. His fortune could have bought the entire ship. It could not buy the seat. In Lifeboat 16, a young woman felt something pressed suddenly into her arms. A stranger's baby, handed down from the deck. It was Violet Jessup, the stewardess. She held that child through the freezing night. At 2:20 in the morning, the lights blinked once and went out. The largest ship on Earth slipped under the glass calm sea, and 1,000 pocket watches stopped. Every disaster asks one question, and that night it asked 2,000 people at once. When nothing can be saved, what do you choose to be? The band chose to play, survivors said, to the very end. The builders and engineers chose to stay below, holding the lights on so others could see to escape. The wireless operators chose to keep tapping the signal long after they were released from duty. Ida Strauss chose 50 years of marriage over 20 more years of life. Not everyone chose well. The Californian sat on the horizon, close enough, by most accounts, to watch the distress rockets rise, and did not come. Her radio operator was asleep. Her officers debated what the rockets meant until there was nothing left to debate. That is the true cargo of this story. The ice found the ship, but the choices, those were human. Just after 4 in the morning, the Carpathia came pounding out of the dark, past icebergs she could barely see, and found the lifeboats scattered across the dawn. Just over 700 people were pulled from the boats. Around 1,500 were gone. Violet Jessup handed the baby back to a woman who ran to claim it, and, remarkably, went straight back to sea. 4 years later, she survived the sinking of Titanic's own sister ship. History remembers her as Miss Unsinkable. And here is the part of this story most videos never tell you. The world did not just mourn, it rewrote the rules. After that night, every ship was required to carry lifeboat seats for every soul on board. Radios were manned 24 hours. An international patrol was created to track icebergs, and it still operates today, more than a century later. Sailors have a saying, safety regulations are written in blood. The Titanic wrote an entire chapter. Every calm ocean crossing since has been carrying her passengers' signatures. Think back to those pocket watches in the museum cases. Frozen hands. 2:20 in the morning. A watch can only record the moment time ran out. It cannot record what people did with their final hour. The music, the promises, the baby passed hand to hand over dark water. For that, we have only the survivors' words. And that is why we still tell this story, a century later. Not because a ship sank, but because of who people became while it was sinking. And that, my friend, is worth carrying off this ship and into your own week. None of us controls the ice. We control the hour. What we do with the time we are given, however much of it there is. The passengers who boarded that ship thought they had all the time in the world. Learn the language, make the call, start the thing. Your English journey is the same. Do not wait for perfect waters. The best hour to begin is the one on the clock right now. So here is my question for you tonight, and I read every answer. What saved people that night? Luck or character? One word in the comments. Luck or character? Let's see which side of the fire you sit on. If this story earned it, subscribe. There is a new chair by this fire every Tuesday and Friday. And next time, the richest man aboard the Titanic lost everything in one night. But there was another American whose fortune grew larger than his own government's, and a courtroom defeat only made him richer. That story is already waiting by the fire. The fire's still warm, and there is always a chair for you. I'm Daniel Reed, and this is Fireside History.